Welcome to Concrete and Comfort, where we explore how winter can soften even the most austere spaces. This is a journey into the tender potential of the industrial loft, spaces known for their sharp edges, raw textures, and vast, echoing volumes. But here, in the midst of winter's hush, we discover a new dialogue. One where structure meets stillness. Where the elemental becomes emotional. Welcome to Charette Theory. Let's begin. In the heart of the city, where the rhythm of life echoes through steel beams and reverberates across concrete walls, a quiet transformation is unfolding. It's not a rejection of the industrial, but a reclamation of it. A turning inward. In these cavernous lofts once dedicated to labor, we find ourselves seeking not noise, but nuance. Not production, but presence. Picture a former warehouse, its walls steeped in history, its floors etched by time. The ceilings soar, ductwork snakes overhead, and tall windows open onto frozen skies. The air is still, and everything feels suspended. It's here, inside these bold architectural containers, that we begin to carve out warmth. Not with grand gestures, but with intimate ones. A nook by the window. A chair that welcomes your weight. A blanket heavy with memory. These are acts of resistance against the cold, and invitations into contemplation. A winter nook is not just a cozy corner, it's a deliberate shift in tempo. A room within a room, created not to hide from the season, but to dwell more deeply in it. It's a retreat for rituals, morning journaling as light filters through glass, a book opened beneath soft lamplight, the scent of cedar lifting gently in the air. It is your breath slowing. Your body relaxing. Your mind finally quiet. Over the next hour, we'll explore how to create such spaces. How to cultivate intimacy within immensity. How to take the raw, structural language of industrial design and shape it into something soulful. These lofts, with their open floor plans, their exposed steel, and their unapologetic scale, ask a question in winter: can you find softness here? We'll answer with design, not as decoration, but as an emotional framework. Because in the season of cold, darkness, and inward reflection, every home needs a place of pause. A winter nook is that pause made visible. This is more than aesthetics. It's atmosphere. It's intention. And it begins with seeing the industrial not as a barrier to comfort, but as the raw beginning of it. To understand the winter nook, we must first understand the architecture it lives within. The industrial loft is more than a trend, it is a typology born of transformation. Once the engines of production, these spaces were factories, warehouses, textile mills. Their bones are honest, no ornament, no pretense. Just structure and utility, made visible. And yet, in their unapologetic rawness lies their deepest beauty. High ceilings stretch overhead like skies held in place by riveted steel columns. The floors are poured concrete, smoothed by decades of wear. Walls are bare brick, sometimes patched, sometimes crumbling slightly at the edges, never perfect, and that's the point. The ductwork above doesn't hide, it arcs through the room in silver rhythm. Windows are massive, steel-framed grids that catch the shifting winter light and pull it into the space like liquid amber. In summer, the loft can feel limitless, airy, exposed. But in winter, that same expansiveness turns cold, almost intimidating. The openness that once invited creativity now calls out for containment. And that's where the winter nook enters, not as decoration, but as counterpoint. Think of the loft as a canvas stretched wide, raw, and ready. It gives us freedom. It gives us scale. But it also requires us to compose within it, to create zones of meaning, intimacy, and human presence. Nooks provide that anchor. Where the architecture expands, the nook gathers. Where the ceiling soars, the nook invites us down. Emotionally, it shifts the focus from vastness to closeness. This isn't about fighting the architecture. It's about listening to it. Responding. The industrial loft asks us to be intentional. To define spaces not with walls, but with gesture. Not with separation, but with suggestion. A winter nook becomes a hearth without a fire. A pocket of stillness within the motion of open-plan life. And like any good composition, it draws strength from contrast. The hardness of the structure enhances the softness we add. The coldness of materials makes warmth more profound. The silence of the space makes every sound, a page turning, a kettle boiling, feel sacred. We're not decorating within the loft. We're collaborating with it, honoring its past while shaping its present. And in winter, that means recognizing its edges and softening them. Recognizing its vastness and embracing it through moments of intentional retreat. This is the heart of loft living in the colder months. The balance of raw and refined. Of exposure and enclosure. The loft is the frame, and the nook is the pause. Every winter nook begins with one crucial decision: where it lives. In the vast openness of an industrial loft, this isn't a casual choice. It's an act of composition, a quiet choreography between light, structure, and the rhythms of daily life. Begin by watching how winter light moves through the space. The sun sits lower in the sky during these months, casting long, golden shadows across the floor. It doesn't flood, it drapes. A tall steel-framed window that felt harsh in summer now softens with morning light, the cold glass etched with condensation, the city beyond blurred and dreamlike. Placing a nook near one of these windows transforms light into warmth. A simple armchair here becomes a ritual, something you return to again and again as dawn arrives. But not every nook craves light. Sometimes, what we long for is enclosure. A corner beneath a mezzanine or a cantilevered stair becomes a refuge, dim, grounded, and protected. Shadows gather here like folded blankets. The space narrows just enough to feel personal. In a structure built for scale, this kind of subtle containment feels like a quiet gift. Brick columns, often structural remnants of the building's original life, can become architectural guardians. The spaces between them form alcoves that seem to offer themselves naturally for a nook. Tuck a bench or a low bookshelf here, and suddenly the room is speaking in new tones, more hushed, more human. Even the backs of large furniture pieces, like an expansive industrial bookcase or a modular sofa, can become anchors. They don't have to close the space off. They only need to suggest a shift. A threshold. A psychological doorway from open to intimate. Think also about how you move through the space. A nook shouldn't be isolated, it should feel discoverable. Perhaps it's along a path you already walk daily. A visual pause at the edge of motion. These small moments of recognition this is my place, build a relationship between you and the room. Above all, let spatial contrast guide you. Coziness is not created in a vacuum. It's felt most deeply when surrounded by openness. A single pendant light hanging low in a tall ceilinged room. A rug laid thick and soft against cold, echoing concrete. A blanket over the lap in a space that once echoed with machines. These contrasts are the soul of the winter nook. Don't rush the decision. Sit in different places at different times of day. Observe. What do you feel when you're there? Does your body relax? Does your breath slow? A nook is less about how it looks, and more about how it holds you. Remember, in a loft, you're not looking for a place to hide. You're looking for a place to dwell. When we speak of industrial design, we often speak of the hard, the unyielding, the structural. But winter calls something else out from these materials, not opposition, but balance. The loft isn't a space to soften completely, nor should it be. The rawness is part of its truth. But within that truth, we can layer tenderness. The material palette of the Industrial Loft is unapologetic, exposed concrete, cold underfoot. Steel-framed windows that resist rust, even as they sweat in the cold. Brick, often chipped, sometimes whitewashed, often left bare. This is a language born of function, of permanence. And in winter, it becomes the perfect backdrop for something deeply human. Start with what touches the skin. A shearling throw draped over a cool steel chair creates immediate tension and relief. That single layer of warmth changes the object's intention. It's no longer just a remnant of industry, it becomes part of comfort. Velvet, dense and rich, clings beautifully to the textures of concrete. Try a cushion in deep moss or plum, resting casually against a bench that was once a loading dock ledge. Wool, especially in oversized chunky knits, adds weight and invitation. It doesn't shout, its presence is felt through touch. Even the furniture itself becomes an act of dialogue. A leather sofa, worn and softened with time, anchors the space. Its patina speaks of years lived and seasons past. Layer it with natural linen pillows, not too perfect, not too fluffed. We're not staging a photo, we're building a sanctuary. Wood plays a pivotal role here. Not the polished, pristine kind, but wood with grain, with history. Reclaimed planks shaped into side tables or benches. A wide, low coffee table with nicks and stains that don't detract, they tell stories. These surfaces don't try to match the concrete or the steel. They warm them. They answer their silence with texture. Textiles, too, should feel lived in. Thick linen drapes hung from a steel pipe. A wool rug with worn edges layered over jute. Even a canvas drop cloth reproposed as a casual curtain or slipcover can feel right here, modest, utilitarian, but oddly intimate. What we're building isn't a contrast for contrast's sake, it's a conversation. We're not covering the structure, we're engaging it. The coldness of the loft is not a problem to solve, but a space to respond to. Materials become our voice in that response, our way of saying, this is still home. And the more tactile the better. Let the hand know where it is. Let the footstep sound different on wood than it does on concrete. Let the blanket feel heavier than expected. This is how winter is meant to be experienced, not rushed through, but dwelled in. Felt deeply. Embraced fully. Here, rawness isn't something to escape, it's something to layer into. Because only in the presence of the cold, the hard, the vast, can the warm, the soft, and the quiet truly bloom. A winter nook lives or dies by how it invites the body to settle. And in a loft, where space flows freely and furniture rarely rests against walls, seating becomes sculpture, both functional and emotional. It signals intention. It shapes the atmosphere. And above all, it beckons. Begin with form. A low-slung armchair in distressed leather is more than a place to sit, it's an anchor. Its lines contrast against the verticality of a loft's structural elements. The The softness of the seat, cracked and worn with time, stands against the hard lines of steel beams and concrete planes. It suggests a kind of weight, a groundedness, as if the room itself finally takes a breath and sits down beside you. Window benches are another essential move, built in if possible, but just as powerful when composed with care. Position one beneath a grid of industrial windows, and you create a place where light and stillness converge. Line the bench with a dense, cushioned top. Layer it in textiles, wool throws, velvet bolsters, a patchwork of textures that ask nothing but your quiet presence. Add storage beneath, a nod to function, yes, but also a way to root the nook with mass and purpose. In more open areas, go low. Palette stacked and softened with thick floor cushions. Tatami-inspired layouts. Layered rugs that welcome you to sit near the ground, close to heat, light, or quiet. There's something deeply human about a space that asks us not to rise above the architecture, but to enter it fully, at eye level with texture, warmth, and detail. Rugs are crucial. In a loft, where every sound echoes and every surface hardens, rugs become not just comfort, but containment. Lay them thickly, deliberately. Use a flat weave as a base, then layer a plush vintage Persian or a faux fur atop it. Don't be afraid of overlap. A nook is a collage, not a showroom. These rugs become the gravity of the space. They hold it emotionally and acoustically. They say, this area is not just passed through. It is stayed in. And think in terms of zones. One for reading. One for tea. One simply for silence. Layouts should feel like pauses in the openness, like the city outside has stopped just long enough for you to gather yourself. Group seating around a low table. Allow asymmetry. Let a single chair float beside a floor lamp. Lofts resist perfection, your layout should, too. This is about choreography more than order. Where does the eye land? Where does the hand reach? How does the body curl, stretch, lean? These are the real questions of winter seating, not what looks balanced in a photo, but what supports presence in a moment. The industrial loft doesn't give intimacy freely. You have to shape it. And through seating, you shape not just the room, but how you exist inside it. In winter, light becomes less about illumination and more about emotion. It softens. It slows. It doesn't just show you the room, it shows you how to feel in it. And in the expansive, raw geometry of an industrial loft, lighting becomes essential not only to visibility, but to intimacy. It defines the mood. It sculpts the shadows. It tells you where warmth is. Begin with the large gestures, the structural lighting. Industrial pendants with matte black finishes, suspended by chains from exposed ceiling joists. Oversized factory lights that hang low, drawing attention to the height they descend from. Exposed bulbs encased in wire cages, their filaments glowing amber like small suns in the concrete dusk. These elements speak the language of the loft. They echo its origins. But they're only the beginning. A winter nook doesn't live in overhead light. It lives in the slow choreography of layered luminance. Think of light like texture, something you build up, piece by piece. Introduce smaller, warmer sources. A metal floor lamp with an Edison bulb and a worn brass finish aimed gently at a book or a teacup. A cluster of candles in concrete holders, flickering against a brick wall. These are not just decorative, they are emotional infrastructure. They shape how time passes in the space. Table lamps are especially powerful in this context. Choose bases that feel grounded, cast iron, weathered ceramic, or even salvaged wood. Shades should soften, not scatter. Linen, parchment, even smoked glass. The light should pull, not flood. Think warmth over wattage. And then, there's ambient magic. String lights are often relegated to whimsy, but when used deliberately, they become something else. Drape them along a beam or tuck them behind a sheer curtain, let them glow rather than sparkle. Their presence should be felt more than seen, like a trace of warmth lingering in the corner of the eye. In a loft, where everything is open and honest, even the smallest touch of softness is amplified. Don't forget task lighting. A swing arm sconce mounted on a reclaimed board. A clip-on lamp to a bookshelf bracket. A directional spotlight aimed at an art piece or a textured wall. These help structure your activities, reading, journaling, simply being, and define purpose within the undefined. And shadows are part of the design. In winter, what you don't like matters just as much as what you do. Let corners recede into darkness. Let objects fall into silhouette. A nook doesn't need to glow in totality. It needs to pulse gently, like breath. Warmth, then pause. Light, then hush. Temperature matters too. Choose bulbs with a warm spectrum, 2700K or lower. Avoid the sharp white of midday. Let the color of your lighting echo firelight, not fluorescence. When paired with concrete, brick, and steel, this tone doesn't just look good, it feels human. It returns us to the hearth, even in a space that never had one. In the end, lighting isn't the background. It's the narrative. It is how you write feeling into the structure. It is how winter speaks to the eye. And in a loft, built for function, now reclaimed for feeling, light becomes not just what we see, but what we hold. In the open terrain of an industrial loft, there are no automatic boundaries. Walls do not shelter each moment. Rooms are not preordained. Instead, the architecture gives you volume and invites you to carve intimacy from its vastness. This is where containment becomes an art form. Not enclosure, but suggestion. Not division, but designation. In a loft, you don't build rooms, you frame experiences. Visual framing is how a nook announces itself to the eye. In a place where everything is visible at once, how do you draw attention to a single moment? Begin with height. Tall bookshelves are allies in spatial definition. When positioned perpendicular to a wall, or floating gently away from one, they become soft partitions, suggesting without ceiling. Fill them loosely. A mix of books, ceramics, closed boxes, trailing plants. Let the objects feel lived in, but not cluttered. Let them breathe. Curtains offer another tool, one loaded with softness. Not the tight, symmetrical panels of traditional design, but heavy linen lengths hung from pipes or cables. Let them drape, half-closed, languid. Even pulled halfway across a corner, they tell a story that beyond this veil, something quiet awaits. This is spatial poetry in the industrial language. Screens, too, offer a sculptural means of separation. Choose materials that echo the loft's textures, a folding screen made of wood slats, blackened steel, or thick canvas stretched between pipes. Place it behind a chair or near a rug's edge. It doesn't need to block, it only needs to pause. These gestures of containment are invitations. They signal that this space is slower, more personal, more inward. Verticality plays a profound role. Industrial spaces rise more than they spread, and your nook should use that. Tall indoor plants, like fiddle leaf figs, rubber trees, or even dried pampas grass, help sculpt the volume above seated eye level. Their presence softens the ceiling's reach, and they act as living columns around which atmosphere gathers. Hang pendant lights low over your nook, especially those with warm, intimate tones. Their drop, their chord, their very weight becomes a visual boundary. Paired with a rug below and a chair in between, they form a spatial sentence. This place has a center. It has a story. It holds stillness. Framed art is also a boundary. Not because it closes, but because it focuses. A single large piece behind a reading chair, perhaps a monochrome photograph or a textured abstract, acts as a visual cue. Or lean smaller works along ledges or consoles. In an industrial loft, not every wall must be punctured. The lean feels intentional, casual, true to the transitory spirit of the space. And of course, rugs. Never underestimate the grounding power of rugs. One beneath your feet, layered with another askew, creates shape and comfort. Let the edge of a rug meet the legs of a chair or a bench. Let it extend just beyond a light pool. Rugs are not decoration in a loft, they are declaration. What you're creating is not a room within a room. You're creating a condition, a feeling, a mental pocket of safety and pause within a landscape of expanse and echo. Framing a nook is like drawing breath into architecture. It's how we answer openness with intimacy. Containment is not confinement. It is the act of gathering the senses. And in a space defined by its scale, that gentle gathering, that hush of delineation, is where the human element begins. Once structure and containment are in place, a winter nook begins to ask for something more personal, something emotional. In the industrial loft, where rawness and utility dominate the bones of the space, it's the decor that brings in memory, individuality, and quiet beauty. This isn't about decoration in the ornamental sense. It's about resonance. About placing objects that don't just belong visually, but belong to you. Think first in terms of tone. A winter nook doesn't need to announce itself with bold colors or busy patterns. Its voice is lower, slower. Choose a muted palette, rich in earth and shadow, ochres, umbers, deep greens, soot black, rust, bone, and smoke. These tones speak in harmony with the loft's materials, aged brick, cold steel, mottled concrete. They feel both grounded and atmospheric. Then think in terms of texture. Layering is your greatest tool. On a windowsill, combine an old terracotta planter with a stoneware bowl and a cast iron candle holder. Let the surfaces contrast. Let them catch the light differently. Texture is how stillness comes alive. It's what the eye touches before the hand does. Objects matter deeply. Fill the space with things that carry quiet histories. A worn book with a cracked spine. A handmade ceramic mug whose glaze is uneven. A vintage radio, still functional, or not. A framed photograph, not posed, but captured. These objects aren't just placed, they are part of the story the Nook is telling. They speak of ritual, of care, of presence. Look for decor that balances industrial weight with human softness. A brass tray set atop a rough-cut wood table. Felt coasters beneath a chipped enamel teapot. A pile of woolen blankets in a steel basket. It's in these juxtapositions that a sense of home takes root within the hard geometry of the loft. Seasonal cues are welcome, but keep them subtle. No need for overt holiday references. Instead, evoke the rhythm of winter itself. A bowl of pine cones, collected, not purchased. A bundle of dried eucalyptus or lavender tied with twine. A tall, minimal vase holding bare winter branches, their forms delicate and architectural. These aren't props. They are seasonal notes, a kind of interior weather, always shifting, always felt. Let absence be part of the language, too. Not every surface must be filled. In a loft, space is a design material. Allow some objects to breathe. A small sculpture alone on a console. A single stack of books, neatly tethered by a ceramic stone. A cushion left deliberately off-center. These quiet gestures leave room for the imagination. They allow the space to feel lived in without being staged. And consider scent as part of your decor. In winter, especially, the air is part of the experience. Introduce warmth through cedarwood incense, a sandalwood candle, or an amber diffuser tucked onto a shelf. These are invisible layers, but they are no less powerful. They help the room settle into itself, and they anchor memory. The way a nook smells on a winter morning can stay with you for years. Ultimately, this is about building intimacy through quiet layers. Decor in an industrial nook doesn't scream. It doesn't perform. It whispers. It invites you to slow down, to linger, to notice. Each object becomes a kind of punctuation mark in the rhythm of the space. Not just things to look at, but things that affirm your presence. A winter nook is not a showroom. It is a shelter of self. And in the grand, echoing architecture of a loft, that shelter must be built not with grand gestures, but with careful, quiet acts of choice. A nook becomes meaningful not by how it looks alone, but by how it's used. In winter especially, design must respond to rhythm, the slow morning stretch, the long dusk, the quiet hours in between. These moments are not just aesthetic, they're lived. And the most successful winter nooks are the ones that are shaped around daily rituals, those small, grounding acts that make cold days feel full. Begin with intention. Ask yourself, what will this nook be for? Reading, certainly, but also daydreaming, journaling, brewing tea, talking softly, or doing nothing at all. The best nooks don't multitask. They focus. They become vessels for a single kind of quiet pleasure. If your nook is for reading, let it speak that language fluently. Anchor it with a chair that invites depth, something low, maybe a bit worn, something you can settle into. Add a side table just big enough for a stack of books and a warm drink. Nearby, a standing lamp with a dimmer, so the light can match the light outside. Add a throw blanket that holds its own texture, something tactile and generous. Not every surface needs to be styled, but every element should serve the act of being still. If the nook is for writing or journaling, make space for paper. Choose a desk that feels solid and honest, maybe raw wood, maybe metal with patina. Something industrial in material but human in scale. Pair it with a chair that invites posture but not rigidity. Let the tools of reflection be close at hand, a favorite pen, a blank journal, a vessel for holding small notes or clippings. Even a candle can be a ritual, lighting it signals the start of inward time. And consider the ritual of tea or coffee. A winter nook is the perfect setting for a personal tea station, a cast iron kettle sitting quietly on a trivet, stoneware mugs arranged on a wooden tray, a linen napkin folded just so. Maybe a small jar of loose leaf tea or a tin of ground espresso. These elements don't just support use, they create it. They turn an area into a scene. And they invite a kind of slowness that industrial lofts, with all their scale and openness, so often crave. Rituals can also be sensory. Think about what you hear in your nook. A quiet record playing in the background. A small speaker tucked onto a shelf, playing ambient sounds or winter jazz. Sound can seal a space just as powerfully as walls do. Or maybe your nook leans into silence, the thick, absorbing quiet of rugs and books and soft upholstery. Let it reflect your own way of coming home to yourself. Lighting should follow your ritual, not precede it. If the nook is for early mornings, arrange it to catch the first light, that golden low-slung winter sun. If it's for evenings, let the shadows deepen and the warmth of lamps take over. Consider layered lighting even here, a floor lamp, a candle, perhaps even a string of soft bulbs woven through a shelf or across a beam. Not for whimsy, but for magic. Because every ritual, no matter how simple, deserves to feel special. In the end, what defines a winter nook is not the furniture, or even the decor, but the way it holds your time. It becomes a small architecture of care. It honors the ritual of slowness in a season that asks us to turn inward. To restore. To breathe more deliberately. A nook should feel like a pause that belongs only to you. The book you keep returning to. The mug that only feels right in your hand. The light you sit in without noticing, until you do. The scent of a page, the rhythm of a journal entry, the quiet clink of ceramic on wood. These are not grand gestures, but they are the moments we return to all winter long. Your nook becomes a kind of anchor. In a world that moves quickly, even within the walls of a soaring loft, it offers stillness by design. A chosen moment. A chosen rhythm. A chosen life. In winter, nature retreats. Trees shed, gardens sleep, and the landscape takes on a palette of restraint, bare, bone-colored, quietly profound. But even as the natural world pulls inward, we can draw it in closer. Within the industrial loft, where concrete, brick, and steel dominate, bringing nature indoors becomes not just an aesthetic gesture, it becomes emotional. It's how we reconnect with cycles beyond our walls. It's how we bring breath back to the build. This doesn't mean overwhelming the space with greenery. In fact, within the language of the industrial, restraint is part of the poetry. A single potted evergreen, standing against a brick wall, feels more powerful than a jungle of foliage. Choose plants with winter dignity, structural, sculptural, textural. Think juniper, olive, rubber tree, or even a tall bundle of eucalyptus in a ceramic crock. Their forms speak quietly, like silhouettes against the city skyline. Bare branches are particularly evocative this time of year. Arrange them in tall vessels, blackened clay, reclaimed glass, raw concrete. Let them stretch upward, echoing the vertical lines of pipes and beams. Their stillness reminds us that life persists even in dormancy. They are nature's own architecture, stripped back to form and line. They harmonize with the loft, not in contrast, but in kind. Smaller gestures matter too. A shallow bowl filled with pine cones. A few pieces of driftwood or antler placed atop a console. A preserved fern under glass. These are not centerpieces, they are traces. They belong in the background of the room the same way wind belongs in the background of winter. Natural, unobtrusive, and essential. Then, bring nature in through the senses. In a season when the windows stay closed, scent becomes a form of air. Choose it with care. Burn a cedarwood candle in the early evening, when the light is thin and the shadows lengthen. Diffuse essential oils, amber, pine, sandalwood. Scents that mimic the forest floor or the grain of an old cabin. The goal is not to recreate nature exactly, but to evoke its atmosphere. Sound can join the natural palette as well. A distant record of rain. The sound of wood crackling, even if it's from a speaker. The rustle of a dried leaf garland hung softly along an iron beam. Lofts tend to amplify sound, the creak of leather, the shuffle of socks across concrete, so let nature be part of that resonance. Materials matter, too. Use them to echo the tactility of the outdoors. Stoneware mugs that feel rough in the hand. Woven baskets. Wool throws. Linen napkins that crumple and crease. When these materials interact with light, warmth, and daily use, they take on a living quality. They soften the industrial without masking it. They remind us that, like the seasons, interiors evolve, not in large, sweeping changes, but in accumulated layers. Don't be afraid to let nature feel raw. Let leaves yellow slightly in the vase. Let a branch bend instead of standing tall. Let surfaces age. There's elegance in imperfection, especially in winter. Especially in a space like the loft, where the raw is already part of the vocabulary. The goal is not to decorate with nature, it's to allow nature to reside here, in quiet coexistence with metal, brick, and glass. In this way, your nook becomes not just a place within the building, but a place within the season. A space that remembers the wind even when you can't feel it. That echoes the woods even when you're surrounded by skyline. That carries, softly, the rhythm of the living world. Nature, in winter, is not loud. It's not green and blooming. It's quiet and inward, like us. And by bringing it into the industrial space, we allow our homes to reflect that same truth. Not to escape the season, but to honor it. And so we return, full circle, to where this began, with softness inside structure. With the quiet contradiction of warmth blooming inside concrete. In a world where architecture often speaks in bold, loud forms, especially in the industrial loft, what we've explored today is not a rejection of that strength, but a refinement. A way of placing pause inside power. Stillness inside scale. The winter nook is a subtle act of rebellion. In a space designed for work, production, openness, and permanence, the nook dares to be personal, seasonal, and fleeting. It doesn't deny the character of the loft, it completes it. It speaks the same language, but whispers where the rest of the room declares. Look around your own space and ask, not just where the furniture fits, but where you fit. Where the light gathers. Where the quiet settles. Where the concrete seems to invite a little softness. That's where the nook lives. Not just in the corner of the room, but in the rhythm of your winter. And remember, this isn't just design. It's ritual. It's mood. It's a sensory map of your life when the world slows down. Every surface holds memory. Every textile holds temperature. Every book, mug, or candle holds a part of your season. The nook becomes your compass. When the days blur or the cold closes in, it offers orientation, back to self, back to calm. Even the contrasts tell a story. Concrete and comfort. Steel and softness. Scale and intimacy. These aren't opposites, they're what makes the experience whole. The beauty of a winter nook in an industrial loft is that it doesn't erase the rawness, it humanizes it. It doesn't shrink the architecture, it reclaims it for feeling. So if you're shaping your own, begin not with what looks good, but with what feels right. Sit in different corners. Watch how the light shifts through the day. Let scent, texture, and ritual become your design tools. Make space not just for objects, but for atmosphere. Not just for style, but for stillness. Because in the end, a nook isn't measured by square footage or material palette. It's measured by the depth of its invitation. The way it holds you on a cold morning, or shelters you in a quiet dusk. It's the breath inside the structure. The soul inside the frame. Let your nook be that, your winter haven inside a world of steel and stone. Thank you for joining me here on Charette Theory. If this episode resonated with you, if you found yourself reimagining your space or craving a slower rhythm, let us know in the comments. What is your version of softness in the structure? What rituals anchor your winter? Until next time, stay warm, stay grounded, and keep building beauty where it's least expected.